What would you do if, when you realized the biggest dream of your life, you discovered that it could become your worst nightmare? It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But this story is as real as love, hope, and loneliness, which often go hand in hand. Patrick and Mariana just wanted to build a family, driven by the most sincere understanding and the power of kindness. What they didn't know is that, by opening the doors of their hearts, they would also open the doors to a terrifying mystery. Do you believe that not every adoption story is made up of smiles and happy endings? Get ready, because what you are about to discover will shake your deepest beliefs about humanity, compassion, and courage. And it will show you that sometimes the real battle begins precisely at the moment when we think we have already won. Many still believe that love, by itself, is enough to heal all wounds. But what about when what you need to heal is something that goes beyond human understanding? And when innocence hides secrets that not even time could bury? Patrick and Mariana found out in the worst possible way. When they adopted a seemingly fragile and sweet little girl, they never imagined that they would be bringing home not only a new hope, but also a trail of shadows that would test every fiber of their resilience. This story is not just about overcoming or altruism. It is about how humanity can be put to the test when faced with the inexplicable. It is about how fear and courage, sincerity and insecurity walk hand in hand in the most crucial moments of life. So, stay with me until the end of this story, because you will understand that not everything is what it seems. You will realize that the true strength of a family is not only in the happiness of good times, but in the silent courage to protect those we love in the darkest days. Are you prepared to face the invisible side of hope? Are you ready to see how wisdom and perseverance can transform even the darkest fear into a new beginning? I guarantee that by the time you finish this story, you will rethink many things about trust, love, and the true meaning of having a family. Don't put it down. What comes next is as moving as it is disturbing, and completely impossible to forget. Patrick and Mariana always dreamed of starting a family, but the road to get there was full of hidden stones and treacherous curves. They got married young, full of hope, and certain that love would be enough to build a home full of affection and kindness. However, life, with its peculiar way of teaching wisdom, presented them with difficult trials. Years of failed attempts to get pregnant, painful medical exams, expensive and invasive treatments. Each refusal was a blow to the confidence and courage that they insisted on carrying. At family dinners, looks of pity mixed with unsolicited advice, acidic comments disguised as concern. Social pressure added to the loneliness that was silently setting in. However, even in the face of fear and insecurity, they kept the flame of hope alive, fueled by a genuine faith in the power of kindness and in the ability to rebuild their dreams. It was during one of those early mornings of tears and whispered conversations that the decision was made. If they could not create a life, they could welcome one with all the empathy, respect, and understanding that overflowed from their hearts. It was not a contingency plan, but a choice of pure and sincere love, a true act of altruism and honesty with what they felt. Adoption, for them, was a new adventure, a call to offer what was most precious to them to those who needed it most. They decided to dive head and soul into this new challenge, even knowing that they would face judgment and distrust. Many even said that it was not the same thing, as if the blood connection was stronger than the bond of the heart. But Patrick and Mariana knew, with the wisdom of those who live with an open heart, that true humanity is woven by love, perseverance, and compassion, not by genetics. The bureaucratic procedures were long, exhausting, full of tests of patience and resilience. Each visit to social workers, each document required, each interview seemed to test the sincerity of their purpose. There were times when fear and loneliness almost overcame them, times when hope seemed to slip through their fingers like fine sand. But the dream of forming a family That dream planted with so much affection, gratitude, and courage was still there, vibrating strongly within them. Amidst all the doubts, they remained firm, inspired by the idea that somewhere there was a little soul waiting for them, someone who also knew the bitter taste of rejection and who desperately needed a home where the power of kindness reigned supreme. What they did not imagine was that destiny had in store for them encounters and revelations that would require even more strength than they ever dreamed they had. The big day finally arrived. Patrick and Mariana looked at each other with eyes filled with hope and gratitude as they waited in the small room of the shelter. My heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest when the door opened, revealing Mary, a little girl with disheveled hair, big eyes, and a face that was a mix of fear and curiosity. She was small, almost fragile, with an expression of someone who had experienced loneliness up close. But there was also a spark there, a spark of humanity that could break through any barrier. When their eyes met, no words were needed. The connection was immediate, full of empathy, respect, and an inexplicable feeling of reconciliation. Mariana, with tears in her eyes, crouched down and opened her arms. And, as in one of those rare moments when love speaks louder than reason, the girl ran to hug her in a gesture full of understanding and sincerity. The first touch was timid, almost hesitant, but it soon turned into a tight hug, the kind that heals invisible wounds. It was as if the three of them had known each other for a long time, as if life had simply postponed that inevitable meeting. Patrick felt Mary lean her face against his shoulder, a gesture of trust that tore his soul apart with emotion. That night, while the house was still trying to get used to the new energy, they improvised a small party. A simple cake, colorful balloons, and a gift wrapped in shiny paper. When the girl smiled for the first time, shy and suspicious, it was as if hope invaded every wall of that house. Her laughter, muffled and still suspicious, was the most beautiful sound Patrick and Mariana had ever heard. It was the beginning of a new adventure, full of love, perseverance, and the power of kindness. That first night, after lots of playing and stories told in the half-light, Mary fell asleep in the room she now called her own. Mariana, sitting on the edge of the bed, held the girl's small hand tenderly, feeling the weight of all the responsibility they now carried. In the hallway, Patrick watched the scene in silence, his chest full of courage, fear, and deep gratitude. They knew that the journey would be challenging, that the marks of loneliness and insecurity would not disappear overnight. But they were willing to face everything with humility, altruism, and unconditional love. At that moment, between sighs and silent promises, Patrick swore to protect that little life with all the strength of his soul. And, between the lines of the silent night, a new story began to be written, a story that would soon take them down paths they could never have imagined. The first few days were a true bath of love, kindness, and hope. The house seemed to pulse with new life, as if every corner breathed gratitude for the opportunity to start over. Patrick and Mariana dedicated themselves to creating a safe and welcoming environment, full of affection and respect. Mary gradually revealed small signs of trust, a looser smile, an awkward laugh during breakfast, a curious look at her new toys. Everything seemed to be moving towards the construction of a new story based on the power of kindness and the perseverance of hearts willing to love. However, like someone who feels a change in the wind before a storm, Patrick began to notice small things out of place, details that, if looked at in isolation, would not seem alarming, but that, when taken together, began to create a background of unease in the midst of his newfound happiness. The first sign was subtle. Toys that changed. Places during the night. Patrick and Mariana at first attributed it to Mary, perhaps sleepwalking or playing while everyone else slept. Then came the whispers, vague sounds, as if someone were talking in a low voice in the silent hallways of the house. Mariana, waking up with a start one morning, swore she heard the girl talking to someone in the room even though she was completely alone. At breakfast, they pretended to be normal, clinging to hope and the understanding that adaptation required, resilience and courage. But the drawings began to reveal something that neither of them could ignore: distorted figures, featureless faces, hands that seemed to reach out from invisible shadows. The inspiration and courage they had felt in embracing the new challenge began to mix with fear and insecurity that until then they had never felt so deeply. Still, they decided to hold on to the honesty of the love they felt, convincing themselves that everything could be explained with patience, compassion, and humanity. Children, after all, express their traumas in ways that are often difficult to understand, and Patrick knew that the path to reconciliation with the past would require more than sweet words and comforting hugs. Perhaps, they thought, the strangeness was just the echo of the girl's old pains, manifesting itself in ways that escaped the logical gaze of adults. So they decided to invest even more in small, safe routines, bedtime stories that celebrated hope, free drawings during the day to express emotions, afternoons of simple adventures in the park, so that she could feel the lightness of childhood again. Even so, deep in his soul, a seed of fear began to sprout, announcing that something greater could be coming. It was on a grey morning, one of those when the wind seems to whisper omens, that Patrick found the strange envelope in the mailbox. There was no sender, no label, just a yellowed piece of paper, folded almost carelessly. With the courage typical of someone who has faced so much insecurity and loneliness in life, he opened it, and there, written in shaky handwriting, was the message that would freeze the blood in his veins. She is not who you think. Nothing else. No signature, no explanation, just the shadow of fear infiltrating the house they had fought so hard to fill with love, hope, and kindness. Mariana, upon reading the letter, felt the same overwhelming emotion. What could it mean? Was it just a joke in bad taste? Or was there something more, something that escaped her usual understanding and resilience? That morning, the coffee went cold on the table. The words died in their mouths, and Patrick and Mariana's eyes searched, unsuccessfully, for renewed courage. The house, which had previously been home to affection and inspiration, now seemed to also harbor insecurity and doubt. Not knowing who to trust, they decided to act wisely and prudently. They went about their daily routines as normal, hiding from the girl the whirlwind that was swirling inside them, protecting her with the same compassion and respect that had always guided their steps. But inside, fear was taking root. What they didn't know yet was that this would be just the first of many tests of perseverance and altruism that they would face. Unanswered questions began to gather like heavy clouds on the horizon. Who sent the warning? Why? What was there in the girl's past that they still didn't know? Without showing any signs of panic, Patrick and Mariana sought support from each other, immersing themselves in the humility and honesty that had always strengthened their union. They knew that mutual trust would be their best armor in the face of the unknown. Even so, on quieter nights, they would both wake up startled, swearing they could hear light footsteps in the hallways. It was fear mixing with love, a dangerous and inevitable dance that tested the limits of anyone's humanity. So they chose the most difficult path, that of patience, empathy, and careful observation. And deep down, a certainty began to emerge. Despite their fear, they would soon need to delve into Mary's past to protect what the power of kindness had begun to rebuild in their lives. What would they find? This was something that not even the wisest of intuitions could foresee. Moved by courage and the urgent need for protection, Patrick and Mariana decided to discreetly investigate the girl's past. Their first stop was the orphanage where they had begun the adoption process, seeking to recover information that had previously gone unnoticed, perhaps due to excessive trust and hope. However, they were met with evasive answers, missing documents and looks filled with uncomfortable respect. Something didn't add up. The compassion and understanding they felt for Mary made each obstacle they encountered even more painful. They weren't trying to judge or change her past. They just wanted to know how to protect her, with the sincerity and power of the love they had built with so much effort. But the more they searched, the more gaps they found, as if a veil of mystery were deliberately hiding the truth. Between searches in old registry offices, disguised conversations, and visits to places that the girl had drawn without knowing how to explain, disturbing fragments began to emerge. There were reports of name changes, missing psychological reports, and lawsuits that seemed to have been filed in a hurry. Patrick, with the patience of someone who had learned to respect the timing of things, insisted on every detail, guided by silent courage and the inspiration of someone who believes that the power of kindness always finds a way. Mariana, more sensitive, struggled to keep hope alive in the face of increasingly dark revelations. With each new clue, it was as if the shadows of insecurity tried to pull them down, challenging the perseverance and resilience that they had cultivated so much in their personal journeys and now as a family. One afternoon, during a conversation with a former employee of the shelter, the missing piece began to fall into place. Through furtive glances and carefully chosen words, they discovered that the girl came from a family involved in dark cases, poorly told stories and tragedies that had been covered up over time. It wasn't her fault, of course, but what she carried went beyond common understanding. They were invisible scars, deep marks that would require much more than love and affection to be healed. Patrick and Mariana, embraced in the silence of revelation, understood that true humanity manifests itself not only in protecting the innocent, but in having the humility to accept that some pains cannot be erased with good intentions. And even in the face of the fear and loneliness that haunted their souls, they knew their mission was just beginning. With their hearts heavy due to their recent discoveries, Patrick and Mariana began to observe Mary with even more attentive eyes, now moved not by judgment, but by a deep understanding and an even more conscious love. It did not take long for them to realize that beneath that shy smile and sad gaze, a soul laden with ancient secrets was hidden. On certain nights, they would hear her mumbling in her sleep, disjointed phrases, names they did not recognize, in tones that mixed fear and insecurity. Sometimes, when she drew alone, the girl would depict scenes that seemed to have been ripped from a nightmare, hooded figures, shadowy places, eyes lurking in the shadows. With each new sketch, Patrick felt the weight of responsibility tighten on his chest, and his courage was tested, demanding even greater doses of resilience and selflessness. Despite her sweet gestures and moments of genuine affection, the girl often displayed behaviors that were not in keeping with her age. Sometimes she showed a frightening maturity, speaking about heavy topics with disturbing sincerity, as if she had gone through pain that not even adults could bear. Other times, her gaze would wander to places that no one else seemed to see, as if she saw beyond the visible, carrying within herself a silent and sad wisdom. Mariana, in her sensitivity as a soul mother, tried to approach with kindness, seeking spaces for reconciliation, but it was like stepping on broken glass. Any false move could drive her even further apart. Love, understanding, and perseverance became the only tools capable of maintaining that fragile connection, defying logic and embracing mystery. Aware that forcing the girl to reveal her secrets could cause more harm than good, Patrick and Mariana chose the most difficult path, that of patience and humanity. They decided to build, day after day, a fortress of trust where she could gradually let down her defenses. It was a silent task, invisible to the hurried eyes of the world, but full of hope and the power of kindness. Small gestures such as preparing her favorite dish, watching old cartoons together, inventing games that celebrated innocence became their weapons against the loneliness and fear that haunted the girl. And although they did not yet know the extent of what they were facing, they felt with the intuition that only true love can provide that they would soon need to be stronger than ever to protect that precious soul. It did not take long for Patrick and Mariana to realize that something much bigger and more threatening was stalking their new family. At first, they were just impressions: a strange car parked for long minutes in front of the house, silent phone, calls that interrupted their nights, furtive glances from strangers on the streets of the neighborhood. Little by little, the fear, which had previously been whispered in dreams, became a palpable presence. The feeling of insecurity invaded the days of affection and hope that they tried to build for Mary. Even with all the courage and resilience they cultivated, it was impossible to ignore the growing weight of that invisible threat. Patrick's instinctive wisdom told him that it was time to act with humility and honesty, without allowing fear to destroy what they had achieved with so much love and perseverance. The friends, who had been so present before, began to distance themselves with lame excuses. Some neighbors began to look askance, whispering on the corners as if they knew something that Patrick and Mariana still struggled to understand. Humanity, which they had so often celebrated as the driving force of life, now seemed to slip through their fingers. Even so, they held on to mutual trust, to the empathy built day after day, to the certainty that the power of kindness would not be easily defeated. Patrick reinforced the security of the house, while Mariana taught Mary to recognize signs of danger in a playful and delicate way. They were practical actions, fueled by understanding and the urgent need to protect that which had become the greatest source of inspiration in their lives. On nights of tense silence, when the wind seemed to bring ancient whispers, Patrick reflected on the courage needed to face the unknown. He thought about how many times fear paralyzes dreams, how many stories of love and altruism were interrupted because someone gave up at the first shadow. But he and Mariana would not be like that. Not after everything they had been through to build that family. Hope was their anchor, sincerity their shield, and resilience their silent strength. Even without knowing exactly where the next blow would come from, they were determined to resist. Because deep down, they knew that true humanity is proven in the moments when that fear tries to turn off the light. And something inside them, something greater than insecurity and terror, said that the greatest revelation was yet to come. The revelation came on a tense night. After a silent chase that culminated in an inevitable encounter, Patrick, driven by courage and the need to protect his family, confronted one of the men who had been prowling the house for days. It was in a forgotten alley in the city, lit only by the flickering lights of a rusty streetlight, that the truth came to light. The girl they adopted was, in fact, the only survivor of a macabre ritual carried out years before by a dark and powerful sect. The shock of hearing those words was indescribable. Patrick felt the ground give way beneath his feet, while the humanity in his chest cried out for understanding and hope. She was not guilty of anything. On the contrary, she had survived, with courage and resilience, horrors that should never touch a child. The man, overcome by fear and reluctant sincerity, revealed that the girl was special, marked by something that the group wanted to erase at any cost, a living symbol of their failure, a silent threat to the secret they swore to protect. Patrick listened, torn between the impulse of anger and the urgent need to protect that little being who was now part of his soul. The gratitude for having found her and the love he felt growing every day gave him the strength not to succumb to despair. In his mind, flashes of the disturbing drawings, the night whispers and the sad looks of the girl now made sense. Wisdom told him that there was no going back. The reconciliation between past and present was inevitable, and it was up to him and Mariana to choose which side of history they would be on. When he returned home that cold dawn, Patrick found Mariana lying on the floor of Mary's room, holding her small sleeping hand. The scene, so full of affection, humility, and compassion, rekindled in him the certainty of what they needed to do. It would not be fear that would guide them, but kindness, the power of goodness, and the honesty of love that they had chosen to live. They knew that the journey ahead would be full of dangers, but they also knew that true inspiration is born in the most difficult moments. Mariana, with tears in her eyes, whispered upon hearing the truth, "We will protect her, no matter what." And so, without ceremony or grandiose promises, they made the most difficult and most human decision of their lives, aware that sometimes true strength lies in simply not abandoning those who need us most. That night, with the house plunged into an almost sacred silence, Patrick and Mariana looked at each other as if sharing a secret that changes the destiny of everything. They had to decide, keep Mary by their side, facing real and mortal dangers, or hand her over to the authorities, exposing her perhaps to even greater risks. The doubt was overwhelming. Understanding weighed on one side, the responsibility for their own safety and hers on the other. Mariana, with teary eyes, held the girl's small sleeping hand, while Patrick walked in circles around the room, struggling between fear, hope, and a love that defied all logic. They knew that the decision would require more than courage. It would require wisdom, empathy, respect, and an almost blind faith in the power of kindness that had guided them until then. They talked all night, pondering possibilities, evaluating risks, searching their memories for examples of courage and altruism that could serve as inspiration. They thought about the happy moments built with affection and kindness, in the small signs of reconciliation that they saw blossom in the girl's shy smile and in the trusting looks she gave them, even without knowing the whole truth. Patrick, remembering the stories he had read about resilience and perseverance, knew that often the most sincere act of love is not to protect yourself, but to protect the one who depends on you to find hope again. Mariana, always more intuitive, felt deep down that giving her up would mean betraying not only Mary, but everything they had sworn to be as human beings. When the morning began to timidly dawn on the horizon, the decision had been made. And there was no more room for regrets. They chose love, they chose courage. They chose the humanity that reveals itself in the most difficult choices. Patrick and Mariana knew that they would have to give up old securities, that the life they had planned with so much hope would be turned upside down. But they also knew that by protecting that child, they were protecting the best version of themselves. From that moment on, the sincerity of their intentions would be their armor against fear, honesty their shield, perseverance their fuel. And although the future was uncertain and frightening, they felt in their hearts the powerful certainty that they had made the only possible choice for those who truly believe in the power of kindness. With the decision made, Patrick and Mariana wasted no time. In a few days, with the courage typical of those who are driven by love and hope, they packed up what they could, sold what they could, and set off on a new life. They moved to another city, rewrote their identities, and retraced their paths with the humility of those who understand that sometimes starting over is the most courageous of adventures. Each new step was a mixture of fear, gratitude, and understanding, but also genuine enthusiasm for the chance to build together, a story where affection and protection were unbreakable. Mary, holding her new parents' hands tightly, seemed to blossom little by little, cradling them with her shy smiles and silent resilience. The past still haunted them, but the future rose brightly, guided by the power of kindness. The new house was simple, but each brick seemed charged with honesty, sincerity, and humanity. Patrick and Mariana knew that the threats had not completely disappeared, but they learned that living in fear was giving in to loneliness and insecurity, and they would never allow that. Mary grew up surrounded by affection and inspiration, learning that despite the horrors she had known so early, the world could still be full of kindness and compassion. Patrick, on silent nights, found solace in the small victories of everyday life. Mary's laughter playing in the yard, the spontaneous hugs, the dreams she was finally beginning to dare to have. Mariana, with her intuition heightened, realized that reconciliation with the past was slow but real, a healing process woven with love, perseverance, and patience. Still, there were nights when Patrick woke up in a cold sweat, certain that he had heard whispers by his bedside. The memory of the dangers had never completely disappeared, like invisible scars that life, with its painful wisdom, leaves on all of us. But even in those moments, the courage to protect, the understanding built in adversity, and mutual respect kept that family strong. They knew they had won an important battle, but the war, the fight to ensure that Mary grew up free and safe, it would continue for a long time, and they were ready. United by altruism, honesty, and unshakable faith in the power of kindness, Patrick, Mariana, and their daughter knew that, as long as love was their shield, there would be no shadow that could defeat them, because in the end, true home is not a place. It is a silent pact of protection, humanity, and hope. And now I ask you, how many times in your life have you been afraid to follow your heart? How many opportunities to experience true love, to offer affection, kindness, and protection to someone have you let pass by because fear whispered louder than courage? The story of Patrick, Mariana, and their daughter teaches us that no matter how dark the road may be, it is perseverance, humanity, and compassion that light the way. Isn't it time for you to stop running away from what really matters? To face insecurity and loneliness with the strength that only the power of kindness can offer? Every courageous choice we make shapes a new future. And sometimes what we need most is a little more empathy, trust, and hope to start over. Now think, what would you do if life put in your hands the responsibility of changing someone's destiny? Would you have the humility to accept this call? Would you have the resilience to face the ghosts that would come along with it? True wisdom, as this story shows us, lies in understanding that love is not just a gesture of giving, but a revolutionary act of courage and honesty. It's not about living without fear. It's about not letting fear dictate your decisions. If Patrick and Mariana had let themselves be carried away by doubt, insecurity, or loneliness, how many lives would have remained in the shadows? How many seeds of inspiration would have failed to blossom? And in your life, what dreams are you letting fall asleep due to a lack of courage? If this story touched your heart and made you reflect, don't let the emotions stop here. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and come be a part of this journey of humanity, reconciliation, altruism, and growth. Here in each story, you will find not only emotion but also tools to build a future with more love, respect, and hope. Let's spread together the power of understanding, kindness, and perseverance wherever we go. Because at the end of the day, this is what life is about: choosing every day to be a reflection of what the world needs most: courage, compassion, and an unshakable faith in the transformative power of love.